folks. Welcome to episode number 2 of Bidders on Tap. This is where you get to ask us questions and we answer them. No frills, no fanfare, no BS. So,
Maybe a little BS.
well, maybe a little BS. But we're going to handle a couple of questions today. The first one's going to be on PPC. Since that is my buddy Steve's forte, I'm going to back off, let him take that and run with it.
All right. The question we got was, how do you tell if your PPC campaign is working or not? And that becomes one of those hugely loaded questions. It depends on what you want out of your PPC campaign. So you need to really start with your goals. Is your goal more traffic to your website? Is your goal more likes on your Facebook page? Is your goal more sales? All of these are completely valid goals, and the requirements for success for each of those goals can be wildly different. We can make an assumption at some point that, if your PPC campaign is for likes or just for traffic, then it's pretty much 100% burn, and you're not going to make any money back on it. But as long as you're moving forward with traffic and likes, it's a success. The more challenging question comes about when we decide, is our PPC campaign making money? And from here, you actually have to know a lot more about the numbers of your business than a lot of people actually know, which is really kind of surprising on some levels. So what we usually do is we start from our end result, what is our goal, and work backwards into it. So let's say your goal is to turn a profit by making more sales. So you need to know what you're selling, how much the profit is on that each item, and then what your conversion rate is for traffic going to your website. So let's say your product is a $100 product and you make $30 on it, and your conversion rate is 1%. So you need to make a sale every third visitor. So you need to really be able to crunch those numbers pretty hard to get your pay per click, your cost per click into a region that works. I've created a spreadsheet that we'll share here in the show notes that you can get in your Google Docs and go ahead and make a copy of it for yourself, where you punch in what your traffic is, what your conversion rate is, and what your profit margin is, and it'll tell you how much you can afford to pay for each click that you get. It may tell you you can only pay 10 cents, in which case you need to either target a different product or increase your profit margins. It may also tell you that you can spend $10, in which case you have a huge opportunity to make a lot of really good money on pay-per-click. But without knowing the numbers to back it up, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to actually know that you're making money. I've seen clients whose campaigns we shut down that were spending, or let me rephrase that, they were making $5,000 or $6,000 a month off their pay-per-click accounts. But what was really happening is they were spending $10,000 to make that $5,000. So realistically, they were losing money, but they weren't paying attention because all of these numbers were being dumped into a huge pile. Their website might have been doing $40,000 or $50,000 a month, but they were giving up $5,000 in profit because they were overpaying on their pay-per-click. So it really becomes a huge issue of determining what your goals are and making sure you actually spend the time to work the numbers and make sure that you can actually make money if that, like I said, is your goal. So it's a very, very short answer to a very huge question, but at least it'll get you going in the right direction, and maybe somebody will have more questions and we can kind of flesh this out a little further.
Okay, thanks, Steve. That's a lot more complex than I had thought it was, actually. But I can see your point. You've got to have those numbers down perfect, or you may be losing money and think you're making money.
Exactly. There's nothing worse than thinking you're turning a profit, or even worse than that, your PPC agency says, "Hey, we made $500 for you this month in profit," which is great, but then they charged you $1,000. So, you have to really pay attention to the numbers that you're being given.
Okay, we got time for another question. We had one from an old dojo mate of ours, Jay Pandian. His question is, how do you stay in touch with the important people in your lives when you're prioritized on your career and your business? Uh, that can be a tough one because first, I think the toughest part is to decide who those important people are. I mean, are these the folks that you collaborate with on a regular basis, guys you can sit down and really discuss things that get down to nitty gritty on tactics and methodology? Are they just influencers whose blog posts you like to follow because they post some informative and useful stuff? I think for most of us, it's probably a mix. I know when I started out, I was probably spending 9/10 of my time trying to first find out who I should be following and then follow them and absorb as much as I could of what they had to say. And that didn't leave me a whole lot of time to really sit down and talk nitty gritty with the two or three people that I had already established a real relationship with. So over time, once I got to where I could tell the difference between my head and a bump on a log, I finally got to where I'd gone to the other extreme. I was spending 9/10 of my time talking with colleagues and collaborators, and a very small fraction following people because by that time I had managed to learn enough that I didn't have to absorb as much. I've been fortunate because I got to where some of those people that I had been interacting with turned into friendships. Steve's a good case in point. Steve and I have never met. We've never actually shaken hands, but we've known each other for probably 12 years now. We've worked together a lot over the years, and for an e-friendship, I mean, I think it's as good a friendship as you're going to get without ever actually sitting down and sharing a beer. So, that's one way. That's the way that I did it. That's me. It may not work that way for everyone, but I think the key is you got to try to find out who those people that are important to you are. And that can be tricky, especially if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out what blogs and article authors you should be following because there's a lot of people out there putting out an awful lot of content. Some of them are really good. Some of them should be set on fire and thrown off a cliff. And a lot of them fall somewhere in between. So you can get misguided very easily by falling in a trap that I fell into early on with a couple people. Big name, high visibility, an awful lot of followers. I just assumed everything he said must be perfectly correct. And then I found out over a little time that he was pumping a lot of crap out. And I'd been sitting there soaking it up. So I had to unlearn some of that stuff. And that taught me a lesson. I had to be a little bit more discerning about who I paid attention to. So that's just the way that I did it. I don't know. Maybe Steve, you may have different ideas on it.
This is one of those things that I used to be really good at, and over the last 4 or 5 years have gotten really horrible at. Just because my personal life has kept me quite busy. I've always been a huge fan of trying to stay in touch with people I like, friends online, people who I look up to, people who might look up to me. And for a while, I used to have a fairly rigid schedule where, once a week, I would go through my Skype list and go, who haven't I talked to recently? And just start hammering that list until somebody answered. And I'd chat with them for no good reason other than I had not talked to them in a long time. And it's a lot of fun because you get to catch up with people, and it's always random. Same thing with my phone. I used to just scroll through my phone list and just pick somebody out of the blue because you just never know. You would be amazed at how many people will make the time. Now, you don't need to bother them. You don't need to call them every week just to say, hey, how you doing? But, if you're calling somebody once every 2 or 3 months or whatever, just to kind of keep in touch and see how they're doing. And, especially if you're reaching up the ladder, you want to make it more about them than you, because after a while they'll quit answering your calls. But it's a real
duty.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a real challenge because everybody's busy. We've all got a lot going on, and like I said, I'm pretty terrible at this. There are people who, when this question came up, I'm like, okay, here's a list of people I have not talked to in a very long time, and I just miss talking to them on a regular basis. So I'm going to have to start setting aside a little time every week and just randomly reach out to people until I find one who wants to talk.
Yeah, that's a good approach. It's funny, talk about, the way that works. I used to work with a guy. The guy was the president of the company where I worked, and the company sold. We all left. We were part of a turnaround crew, and he went off someplace. I was one day looking for somebody's phone number, and I came across his name in my directory. I said, "Geez, I haven't talked to Mark in a long time." I called him, and it was a cell phone, and he answered me. He was at work. He was the president of another big corporation, and we spent about an hour on the phone, and ended up with a $150,000 contract out of the deal.
Oh, wow.
Consulting contract, because it just happened pure chance.
Right.
He had just that morning gotten out of a meeting where they decided to hire a consultant to do what I did, and he didn't even realize I was back to doing that. He thought I'd left that behind.
Wow.
And he said, "God, this is serendipity, man." I said, how'd you like to make a trip to Mexico for me for a couple months? True Mexico? Man, I'm in Mexico.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
can do that. But it was great. So yeah, you build those relationships. You don't want to let them die. But
Exactly.
it's difficult sometimes, to work another hour into your busy day. But it can be well worthwhile.
Yeah, I've kind of come to the conclusion we all work too hard, and just blocking out the hours, it's an important part of actually being better at what we do.
Yep, agreed. That wraps up episode number 2. We really appreciate you folks watching. I hope you're getting something out of it. We
Exactly.
would like you guys to contribute some questions. We can sit here and talk all day long, and we might accidentally say something worthwhile. But if we're not answering questions that you need answers to, then we're not really accomplishing anything. And that's what we want to do with Mentors on Tap. We want to pay it forward a little bit, because folks helped us on the way up, and by sharing what they do. And we don't know everything, but we know a little, and we'd like to share that too. So ask your questions. You can catch us on in the show notes. You'll find the link. We've got Facebook page, Twitter account, website. Nail us. We'll get you an answer.